And when I crossed over to the other side, there was this cool sensation where I just knew all is well, was well, will be well. And I had this overwhelming sensation that all is well.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the channel within. Today, I am delighted to have with me Jacob Cooper, and we will be talking about his NDE as well as his books, Life After Breath and Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Welcome, Jacob, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of gossip out there, but it's always good to have good gossip. And I think what we're doing is sharing good gossip about the afterlife. And so thank you for being a wonderful ambassador for that platform. Yeah, I had a near-death experience, as some people might have, heard me on other platforms. But I've written two books that really revolve around it. Certainly, my life has been transformed to a great degree from it. September of 1993 was when I had my near-death experience. I went to a playground as a young child. I climbed a slide and I literally suffocated as a result of a condition called pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough. My human breath was completely stripped from me, completely suffocated to this day. It was the utmost scariest, most traumatizing moment of my life that I could recall by far. And after suffocating, instead of fighting or resisting what was happening, I just found myself surrendering to this infinite breath, this infinite power that's in all of us that I call, the breath of God, or that's really translated in so many vernaculars as the word of spirit is really the breath or the wind of God. And so when my own human breath was taken from me, there was this eternal breath that I remembered and I was able to lean into and to surrender to. And that's when I had a lot of classical, mystical near-death experience encounters where I had a full crossing over experience in my NDE. I experienced a tunnel. I experienced my soul really ascending out of my body and going to this place of endless euphoria where there was no beginning, middle, and end of anything, whether that be love, whether that be time, whether that be feeling. It was all just, in the presence of infinite. And I was able to really encounter the infinite creative source of where all of life emanates from, which was represented to me with this beautiful golden palace, but it just felt like the centerpiece of the apex of this endless apex of reality as we know it. Some may call that God, some may call that the universe. There's a lot of different vernaculars. To me, it's just the infinite creative source whose DNA is love, and that's where all things emanate from. And I was just in this place of complete awe, inspiration, and recollection of who I was, where I came from, and where we're all connected to. I also experienced awareness of this timelessness that I discussed earlier. That it felt like when I was having my NDE, there was this panic that I had, and when I crossed over to the other side, there was this cool sensation where I just knew all is well, was well, will be well, and I had this overwhelming sensation that all is well. And it was such a juxtaposition and contrast to that sheer panic that I had, my own suffocation. And I was just able just to surrender in this infinite awareness that in that grand scheme of things, everything is well. It always has been, it always will be. And there was this timelessness that went beyond an intellectual understanding, but rather a direct, visceral experience. And I have a hard time putting that into words. I experienced a very high vibration on the other side, which I call as Christ consciousness. To me, it was maybe different than the biblical Jesus that you see. It was more of the awareness behind the depiction, of Jesus in the Bible. But to me, it was just infinite love, infinite understanding, and it was a big reunion with the familiarity that I knew in my heart was a very big vibrational frequency on the other side. And so when I speak of what I went through, it was just ascending frequencies. That's all that I was experiencing, on the other side, in the beginning outset of it.
So, because you transitioned when you're 3 years old, did you default to your higher self and was able to process that as the higher self
Mhm.
and not the 3-year-old that went crossed over?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, two things could be true at the same time. On one hand, it was undeniable that I was a 3-year-old child. Like that was real on one hand. And on the other hand, from a broader perspective, that was just an experience of my soul, experiencing itself chronologically as 3 years old. It's like a book. I'll take my book for, I'm not
Sure.
trying to just plug this, but I'd take a look at one page and it's like, oh, this is a page you're looking at, so this must be the whole book. Not really. It's a part of the book, but the book is eternal. I mean, my book is 200 pages, but you get the point. Our stories go far beyond, our temporary experiences in our body, even in our own human experiences. I often ask people, point to yourself, and they'll point to your body. And then I'll ask them, well, what happened to your body 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Your body as an infant, where did that all go? So I think we cling on to things that are constantly changing. And what I found in my near death experience, that change is a real part of this experience. But I do believe what is real can never change. What change isn't necessarily real in the grand scheme of things. The only thing to me that's real is our soul, is love. And so experiencing this in my NDE, this is my higher self. This is my soul. This was my real self that went far beyond just the page that I was writing, in this body as a 3-year-old, as Jacob.
I really like that explanation, as it seems to encapsulate that we are spiritual beings having an eternal and having a human experience.
Mhm.
And then, as a 3-year-old to have had the near that experience, it does reiterate that we are eternal beings. So, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Um, I know that you mentioned your life review. Can we talk about that a little bit, or just a little bit of the events that transpired on the other side,
Oh,
and then
sure.
we can move
Yeah.
on to the books?
After experiencing this, I found myself, surrounded by people who were at the playground that day. And when I looked at all the people that were with me, I was able to see their real true self. I mean, most times we just have like a limited depiction of people that we put in our box, including ourselves. That's the inner ego, and that's kind of how we box people in. And when I was looking at all these people, I could just see, just like myself, some people saw me as a 3-year-old, I was seeing them as so much more than what they were just experiencing. And they were infinite, beautiful souls, and I was able to see their auras, their angels around them. And it just dawned on me looking back in it that everyone is spiritual. Just some people remember that. Some people embody that. Some people live it. Some people forget. And so uh, that's something that certainly dawned on me. But people were trying to wake me up and they were calling me, and I was able to see them, and I wanted to grab them and shake them and tell them that I was okay. But unfortunately, they were looking at my body, which was just a vehicle. It wasn't the full self. And I was able to feel a form to the side of my body that was able to look around them. But all of a sudden, I just saw my own spirit guides that were able to be with me. It was a male and female guide, and they were just the most beautiful beings that I could possibly describe. And when I saw them, I just knew instantaneously that they were with me each step of this journey. In this lifetime, the majority of us have primary guides or spirit guides. Some people, their guides are their higher self, but the majority of people have, primary spirit guides that before we get to this life that we are contracted with, and they love us unconditionally. And that was the realization that I had with my own guides is as much as we respect, love them, and see the beauty in them, that's directly reciprocated towards us. And so they don't get mad at us, they don't judge us. It's not, conditional. They love us unconditionally. For that is who we are. We come from unconditional love, and they really see the true self of who we are. But moments later, I was able to see all these angels that were floating right in front of my awareness, and there was just an endless sea of angels that were literally floating in front of me, and all they were doing was just sending energy, sending love. The angels that I saw were different than the spirit guides because the guides had more distinct characteristics, where these angels that I saw were more uniformal. They were very youthful. and they were just sending energy. And it's just, I was at the playground that day, and then it's just like this thin little veil that separates the other side in this realm. And, all these angels, they're around us at all times. And they were a golden like color when I was seeing them, and they were floating all around me. And so it's like you take this reality and you just turn it just a smidgen. All these beings are around us at all times. They're floating all over the place. We just don't recognize it because we're in our body. We're looking through the physical eyes. We don't always see it. But it's just amazing how like there's infinite spirits floating around us at all times that we don't always see. Anyway, I know you mentioned life review. I, most near-death experiencers are told that there's other work to do and it's not their time. I would say that's around 75% based off of NDE research, that 75% based on hard research, at least that's documented. There's a lot of cases still, that have been researched. But the fewer percentage have autonomy as to what they will do if they, continue on the other side, cross over, or they'll stay in their body. And I was given that question. Why, to this day, I'm not entirely sure why I was given that decision. Other people weren't. It was just that's the reference that I had. Um, I could hypothesize a lot of different things, but I don't know anything per se factually evidence-based in my near-death experience that was given the answers to that. But I just asked, if I'm going to continue to live this life, like what would I look like? Why am I here? The basic existential questions that people have. And, what is my life's purpose? And all of a sudden, I was shown this life review, like you mentioned, and I was able to see not only scenes in my lifetime through my lens, but through the eyes of another, as well as different, previous, lifetimes. And I know it's kind of funky when you talk about timelessness and then you mention previous, but just for practicality standpoints, and just for human understanding, there were other lifetimes. You call them parallel lives, past lives. It could kind of mess with your head a little bit if all is unfolding at once. But, you know, I saw a lot of different lifetimes, and it's all chronicled in my books. And the most recent lifetime, which I do believe ties into my near-death experience, where I had a death by taking my own body. And I just felt my back was against the wall. I made a decision. There was no hope, and I was able to really understand the ties of my own near-death experience and how I felt the same exact sensation of like there was no hope, nothing to hold on to. But I was able to understand my near-death experience was to be a guide and a reference for people to understand how they get their own power. It's not by struggling against outer circumstances, but really about surrendering to the infinite wisdom, the infinite power that we all have, and finding that light when darkness presents itself.
So, which book is that
Both of my
story?
both of my books, I speak about past lives and stuff like that. But what was cool about that was years later, I went to an intuitive who this is before I ever told anyone a word. Without me saying one word, she was able to pick up on that, and it just showed me that, yeah, this was evidential, this was valid. I wasn't making things up or hallucinating, but there was evidence base behind this. And, I saw my life, you know, I guess premonitions of the life that I would live and the work that I would do within this. And I saw myself speaking in front of a lot of people and helping others. And, as beautiful as the other side is to me, and I speak about this a lot, there's nothing more beautiful than being of service to others. There's nothing more expansive than that. And that's why we're all here. And so, um, so that's really what I decided to do. I said the other side would always be there, but this unique opportunity to be Jacob as I knew it was once in a lifetime. I can only be who I am once, and so certainly we have different bodies, but we can never be who we are as we know it in this lifetime again, this is a unique opportunity. And so I wanted to see where the story went and write the story out. And I mean, that literally led to two books and more. But, I'm still writing the story. And so with that agreement, all of the guides, angels, and also I forgot to mention beings that I was connected to in my soul pod that joined me on their side kind of left my field of awareness. And I was left with a degree of just second guessing myself, like, oh my God, what did I just do? I just turned down the other side, and I was just left with a realization of the power of the blueprint that we had before we got here to trust in this infinite intelligence over our limited fears and perspectives, and to trust in our thoughts to be in parallel with what spirit wants us to do and where they feel we can go. And so, with that, I woke up in a hospital bed, and the rest is history. I was rushed by the ambulance to a Long Island hospital, and I was treated for a bit of time and recovered, and my life was certainly forever changed from that period on.
Do you know how long you were in transition or how long you were on the other side or no?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I asked people who were there with me that day, and I don't know, they were just in sheer panic. It's like happened so long ago, but also it's like when someone's like suffocating, you're not looking at your wristwatch, you're just trying to like survive the situation. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I would imagine at least an hour, because by the time the ambulance had to come in to take me to the hospital, it's at least 20 minutes away. So I would estimate it was at least an hour or two. But, you know, it felt like hundreds of years, to be honest with you. I don't know if you ever heard of the author C.S. Lewis's book, The Chronicles of Narnia, but they made that into I mean, I watched a major motion picture as a kid, and I think BBC did something on it in the 80s or 90s. But recently they had something in the modern day. But there's a scene where the children in the book or the movie go into this wardrobe and they just age like their whole lifetimes, and they come out and not a second passed, maybe a minute or two. And it felt like for them it was like 100 years. And for me, that's kind of what it felt like on the other side, where it's like when I came back, it's like, oh my God, really not much time passed, but that felt like such a long time. So time is so different over there than it is over here in many regards.
I am now less resistant to the idea of the tapestry of lives that you and others describe, everything happening all at once. It's still a little difficult for me
Mhm.
to grasp, but I do feel it resonates with me at the same time, where one life may affect another. And let us move on to your books.
Yeah, I mean, writing my books was something that I never really saw coming. As a when I was in college, I was put in like non-accredited classes for reading and writing, and I was in the lowest possible level of those courses. And I just had a really low self-esteem as a writer, as a student. I had a sister who was getting full scholarships or partial scholarships to like really big time schools, and I was just not a great student. But I had an aunt of mine who looked over some of my work, and she looked at it and she says, "You're a really good writer." And I was like, "You're crazy. Everyone's telling me all my life that I'm not good, that I suck, that I'm this." And so that was my perspective. And so with that, degree of belief, all of a sudden my behavior shifted. And it really dawned on me that beliefs aren't a thing, they're everything. And if you want to change your behaviors, you have to start with the beliefs. If you think you can't, you can't. If you think you can, you can. And so much of life is really predicated by our behaviors. I mean, geez, you look at how people believe in God and how they conduct themselves, right? If you think that God is just your VIP God and everyone else, God doesn't care about, then you're going to live a very bubble existence and you're just going to walk over everyone. But if you believe that God is in each and every one of us, you're going to try to find the good and you're going to be a brothers and sisters keeper. So it's very significant, and so that was a big piece of it. And then around this time, I went to like a yoga class, and just someone came up to me and just said, "I see you speaking in front of a lot of people and making a big difference." And I didn't speak one word to this person. So again, that was a lot of validation with what I saw in my premonitions. But in terms of writing, what was a motivating factor to get this book out? I mean, my first book came out, right in the midst of the global pandemic or the COVID-19 pandemic, where I just saw a need where a lot of people were talking about the respiratory system being affected or people feeling suffocated. And so rather than agonizing about what was going on, I just said, I'm going to take this energy and organize it. How could I speak to people who are feeling suffocated? And how can my story relate to their experience when I experienced that same literal sense of sensation? And what did I do? And my book helped out a lot of people, during this time when they felt like there was nothing to hold on to, no place to go. a lot of people were able to turn inward, and life became a little bit of an inner monastery for people to really find this inner power when the outer world, felt like they had a globalized near-death experience, if you will. The world that they knew and this earthly body that they knew was just kind of stripped from people, and people didn't know what to go. And so it just reminds me, like, what is real? All this is just an experience. Everything is changing. The only thing that's real is the love that we are, the love that we experience, and the memories that we create and the meaning that we have in this lifetime. And so that was a little bit of part of it. I certainly had a lot of mentors who came along the way who helped me. But, writing these books has been a you know, big reward in this lifetime. Certainly wasn't from a candidate that was ever expected. I was always a small fish in a small pond. I was never a guy that people expected to make an impact. But, you know, I think we just have to understand that no one came here to ride the current. We all came here to generate one. And if we're able to just understand that, much like when you're a child, you're told, hey, be normal, don't be weird. I think being weird is that part of you that's going to change the world. That's unique. That's the greatest compliment that you can have. So just be your unique self and generate something. Know your passions, know what you're here to do, because you ask people what they regret in their lives is not the things that they did do, it's the things that they didn't do, and that they lived other people's script of who they wanted them to be instead of being true to their values and their behaviors. So, yeah, I mean, we're all unlimited, we're all infinite, but I think the part of it is really to behave that way, conduct yourselves that way, not just intellectualize, that we're unlimited.
You're able to weave psychology and spirituality to help
Mhm.
with healing. How
Yeah,
does that work?
it's a good question. I mean, generally speaking, I do macro and micro, where I have direct client practice, but I'm also an educator. And so these days, what I'm doing is I'm training fellow therapists to understand, all different types of, paranormal experiences as potential normalized encounters. As we know, the quality of our practice or behaviors is predicated on our quality of our information. And for years, the mental health system stigmatized, mediumship experiences or afterlife experiences or just out of body stuff. And they really would sedate people, medicate people, and label it with a DSM diagnosis. I'm not going to discount, the valid pathologies that people, will have, but I do believe a lot of people are misdiagnosed or um, just kind of looked at it in the wrong way. And that really bogs a lot of people down. And so I try to educate people on understanding when someone may experience, real general schizophrenia or where that really may be more connecting to spirit. And a lot of times, people just don't understand that people who are having these experiences, they have a hard time integrating this reality. So I give, fellow therapists the information, to really engage and process and manage clients' experience in the hopes that they can empower, not disempower. It's like if you have a client with ADHD and they have, I don't know, anxiety disorder and you're treating them just for ADHD or medicating them for ADHD and that's not what they have, you're not really going to help out the person. Or if someone has something very vulnerable to share with you, like a spirit visitation, and then you just kind of put them in a blue room in a hospital, it's like you just have to reflect on who we are as therapists. We're not here to dunk people's heads further down when they're drowning, but rather than help people out. So I'm not going to discount the value that the mental health system has because I work in it, but I do believe in having a deep prism of understanding as to where people are coming from. That's not always a pathologized lens, and it's actually able to meet people where they actually are at, not where you're at. And so to kind of remove some of the judgment or stigma that may disvalidate, one's, real and authentic experience. But I also work with clients on what I call soul therapy, or soul psychology. So for instance, people come to my office, they may be hitting a wall with something, and no matter what they do, it's not working. And so rather than addressing it through the same lens, we try to broaden that lens. And that's really where a lot of the, regression work comes into play. I do believe that we may have irrational behaviors, but we're not irrational beings. and there's usually a reasoning behind our behaviors. And sometimes we're not able to see that reasoning because the level of understanding or just the perception is inaccurate. And so, what I try to do is to help people to go to the source of whatever they're experiencing, whether that be through talk therapy or even further in, really engagement with the higher subconscious mind through hypnosis. And, I do a lot of past life regression and something called between life soul regression, if you're not familiar with that these days, which was made into a household name by an individual named Dr. Michael Newton, who worked in the field of psychology, was a bit of a skeptic himself, and he wrote the book, The Journey of Souls, Destiny of Souls. He's since transitioned, I think, around a decade ago. But essentially, between life soul regression, it's fascinating, particularly with the work that I do as, you know, and things that I talk about, because, what's some of the biggest questions that people have is who am I, where did I come from, why am I here, and what happens when I die. And so what I am able to do in between life soul regression is regress people to their memories before they got into this body, to their heaven that they remember, to the blueprint that they wrote before they got here. And it just allows people to understand some of their greater soul's purposes and soul essence. And afterwards, they're oftentimes transformed and they're able to have a lot more of an evidential angle towards some of those questions instead of playing a guessing game.
So I was open up to past life regressions with Many Lives, Many Masters,
Yeah,
Dr. Brian Weiss's book.
sure.
And I did hear about Between Lives, where
Hmm.
his patient Catherine was resting and hearing the masters speak. But in terms of this Between Lives, is it where you are able to bring back activities that occur while we're waiting to come here?
Well, essentially, with it's a good between life soul regression, we regress people to a past life. Usually one past life. That's kind of the appetizer of it. They go to that, and then they cross over, during that lifetime, and so they remember the gateway and all the beings that greeted them in what happened when they cross over. They're able to review that particular lifetime. And then we're able to bring in some of their questions that they come in before the sessions that they have, and they're able to meet with either their higher selves, their guides, and they're able to ask some of those questions as to, why did I choose this body? How am I progressing as a soul? What type of soul do I have? What's my soul's color? What's my soul's origin? And and so there's a lot of questions that people have, and through meeting with the council of elders or wise beings, some will go into the hall of records and bring out books about their souls. Some will just meet with their guides or their higher selves. But a lot of bigger souls questions as it relates to the blueprint before they got into this body, this lifetime, is answered. And they're oftentimes joined by their loved ones on the other side. And they're able to describe, their relationship with them, their origins with them, uh, just their soul pods that they have on the other side. Fascinatingly enough, not everyone comes from the same exact place on the other side. Not all souls, I do believe, are created from the same place on the other side. Some souls are more earth-based in nature, which you call EBs. Some are more interplanetary, which their soul's origin is more of the galactic nature, and some are more of the angelic realm. And so when you look at it, there's so much diverse energy that we have here, but a lot of times people they'll come off to you as if they're like intergalactic or they're more angelic in their presentation. Some may be more kind of earth-based in nature. That's not random, that's not necessarily older soul, younger soul. That just really has to do with different frequencies that the souls were created from and their dwellings on the other side. And so it's really cool, and I'm still learning a lot about this. But sometimes when you ask clients to really go home, a lot of times they'll describe, themselves going to a galactic existence as their home and stuff like that, and other times it'll be more the angelic realm. For me, I think I do have a lot of earth-based qualities, but from my near-death experience, a lot of my origins seems to be more angelic.
So, if you can share with us your favorite or wisdom that you like best from the wisdom of Jacob's ladder, what would that be?
Oh, yeah, the second book, My Wisdom Jacob's Ladder, I call that my Dharma, which is the meaning or the essence of my near-death experience. When you think of Jacob from the Bible, he was running from his life and he had a dream and he saw the angels, going up and down the ladder, and then he ascended, met God. And so it was very allegorical to have mine in a playground by a ladder and stuff like that had that same name as Jacob. But when you think of a ladder, you think of ascension. And I think within each and every one of us in our lifetimes, we're here to evolve, we're here to grow. I do believe life is a school. So I'd say the biggest lesson of the wisdom of Jacob's ladder is understanding that we're here to elevate, to go higher. And the higher you go, the more that you can see. And so what's important is really to remember who we are, to be of love, to treat people well, to treat people kindly, and always looking to continually ascend in how we view things. To me, life is about renewal. Once we feel this is it, this I got it, to me that's a death. What's life is a renewal and a constant change of perception. There's certain things that remain uniformly true, but I think we're always here to expand, be a greater expression. So I think if anything else, Spirit never wants us to be comfortable. They always want us to get out of our comfort zone. And I think if you want to grow, it doesn't happen in a comfort zone. So I think the biggest thing is listen to spirit, do things a little bit out of the box, expand, and continually each day try to ask yourselves, how could I look at life in a broader view? How could I evolve? How could I grow? And that's really a big aspect of the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. The second thing I think is embracing challenges. I think a lot of people, they could look at life and be victims of it and think that life is happening to them. But once you understand that it's a school, you start to embrace challenges because you understand challenges are those seeds that allow for evolution and allow for growth. And you start to see, life in a much different way. You start to see these challenges as an opportunity. A lot of people are just grateful for what they have, but I think gratitude is unconditional, and you have to learn, how to embrace and to be grateful for even the challenges and the hard times because those moments are really allow you to evolve. But there's a lot of different lessons that I have from the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder and a lot of different rungs of my near-death experience that I incorporate. And people could check out the book and learn a lot more about how to get to heaven without dying from some of the lessons that I had with someone who crossed over.
I really like that reminder that we are players in the game of life right now
Hmm.
and to play the game as best as we can
Yeah.
and not wait until we cross over to enjoy that experience. I did hear you talk about Dr. Wayne Dyer as well.
And well, thank you for bringing up Wayne. It's very hard for me to have a conversation without talking about two people, Dr. Raymond Moody, who coined the term near-death experience, and Wayne Dyer, who changed so many lives, including my own, and just his teachings is still ahead of its game. You listen to his words, and for centuries, it's always going to be advanced and ahead. And he was someone who always reinvented, recreated himself too. And he was always, you want to talk about someone who's connected to spirit. He was never stagnant. He'd always be tuning in, and there's always be something different going on with him that he would have to share. So, that's what life is about. It's about a continual renewal, and there's always something new and fresh that he had to offer that was cutting edge to the public and game changing. But yeah, one of the most influential spiritual luminaries that's ever walked the planet. On my eyes, I put him and Ram Dass on my Mount Rushmore for sure. And the Buddha, Jesus, all But yeah, one thing I think Wayne has so many great sayings, but one of my favorite sayings that he has, you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And the other thing that, his illustration of the orange, where you just take an orange, you squeeze it out, you get orange juice. And it's kind of like I had that very close when I was describing my near-death experience and all the people around me, how when you take all the other human stuff away and just kind of squeeze that out, what's left is an infinite loving being inside of each and every one of us. We just have to remember that. And some people walk around their lives like holding on to this false sense of self, and they're living a lie. And I think we came here to remember the truth, to remember who we are. That's how you find heaven. Remember, it's through recollection. That's how I had my near-death experience. One of the biggest gifts of my near-death experience was memory. And I think that's not different than so many people who are listening to your channel. They're tuning into this because there's a voice that knows the truth. There's a voice that remembers something beyond maybe what they were taught, and they're tapping into this voice, and it's familiar what I and so many other people on the planet are discussing these days.
Thank you very much. How do you stay grounded between peek into the spiritual dimensions and now, everyday, your everyday life?
I think everyone has a different engine. I have to stop saying engine because now we have electric cars and cars that work themselves. So there has to be a new, but I'm kind of older school, but everyone's wired a little bit differently. For me, I absolutely love movement. I run around 6 miles almost every day. I try to go outside when it's decent out, or I try to go into the forest and run. When it's too messy out, I'll go on a treadmill, but movement. That's great. Because in reality, I experienced when I had my near-death experience, and I forgot to mention that when I suffocated, my brain literally snapped in half due to suffocation. But that's really thrusted me into having deeper understanding of the brain, because, mental health is the one field that doesn't take what it's studying and look at it directly. Psychiatrists don't look at the brain and really study it. Every other doctor does that. And so what I try to do personally and professionally is demystify the, mental health. But I understand that spiritual health, mental health is all predicated on brain health. And so, it's basic, it's intuitive, but these days everyone needs an explanation. It's like you want to go outside. It's like, oh, I'm not going to go walking. It's like I'm going to get negative ions, and like everything has to be scientific, which is great that we're able to have an explanation and quantify what we're doing. But you know, movement again, the brain is just a filter. When you're moving, it allows the filter to work better and to not be as barricaded between the two realms. And oftentimes, creativity comes that way. Also promotes blood flow, which, decreases brain inflammation, improves your mood, decreases anxiety, sleep, all that stuff. So I'm a big believer in movement. I do hot yoga as well once or twice a week, or Bikram yoga, which again being in a sauna or sweating a lot helps to reduce brain inflammation, which again, to me, helps us connect. It also releases a lot of toxins in the body. So I'm just a big believer in being a pure vessel as much as you can and removing all the barriers to spirit. I never had a drink in over 15 years, never smoked a cigarette. Don't do any of that stuff because I really value the body as a temple. Sugar is my Achilles heel, but can't be perfect, but that's probably the worst of them all. So I have to stop that too, because sugar, I mean, could lead to cancer and a lot things are a lot worse. So, but yeah, taking care of myself, going for walks, being in nature, writing and listening to good podcasts and good information helps me to stay grounded and just remind myself to play, to not take this so seriously, to enjoy. That's the lesson of the playground. I had a, near-death experience in a playground for the world to understand that we're all just the children of God in the eternal playground of God, here to be a brothers and sisters keeper, and to play, laugh, and enjoy, and to not take things too seriously.
That's really good advice. There are three questions I would like
Sure.
to end with today. What brings you joy and laughter these days?
I love Sacha Baron Cohen, like anything that he does back in the day, gets to me. So, or Steve Carell, like a dry humor, yeah, that stuff kind of speaks to me. But yeah, in terms of joy, I love, my family and especially being around my nieces and nephews when they're very young. So that brings me a lot of joy, just being around them and being able to be a kid with them and not so serious. That helps me to have balance. So being playful and around, little children helps. And I think in the way kids are very misunderstood, they have the most wisdom in many ways inside of them, and they're just coming out of the other side. So to me, when I like hang around them, it's almost kind of like psychic amplifiers and segues to the other side.
What would you tell 3-year-old Jacob who was about to embark on one of the best adventures of his life?
Yeah. Um, I would say it's all gonna work out. It's happening for a reason. You signed up for this dance. Enjoy it, trust it, and remind yourself that life is not about you. It's about the service of others and use all of your experiences and lean into all your experiences to help out others. That's what it's all about.
What about a final blessing to anyone listening today?
Yeah, I mean, to anyone listening, and I know, we're recording around the holidays. I know sometimes we could have an empty chair at the table that we really feel, and on one hand, that's very real. Grief is very real, not going to deny it. But just to remind yourself that you are so much more than what you see yourselves as are your loved ones. They, I promise you, go on, and you can too. There's a life after death, and there's a life after their death, and you could find that as well. But just remember who they are, keep on thinking of them, keep on asking Spirit, because Spirit knows every thought that we have. They're connected to us. We are not living in a vacuum. We could feel sometimes disenfranchised or just separated, but that's the biggest illusion that we have. We are so much more that we could have, and we are around so much more beings, and all we have to do is just ask Spirit, tune in, and just connect and find gratitude. Gratitude affects our altitude. The more that we're able to tap into gratitude, the more that our spirit rises up, and we're able to really have unconditional love for life. And, I think that's what we came here for. We came here to learn unconditional love, which to me is understanding God.
Awesome. Where can people find you? And if you can tell us about the books as well, which I will have links to.
Yeah, so I have a website, jacobelcooper.com. If everyone's interested in booking a private, particularly regression seems to be the popular thing these days. Reach me there. I'm on Instagram, Jacob Cooper LCSW, Facebook as well. You could find me as well as YouTube, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. My books are on paper, Kindle, and audio, and usually through Amazon is how people find them, but do check them out. Share the word, leave a review, and I have a third book that I'm working on these days too, so stay posted for that.
Exciting. Thank you very much, Jacob, for being here with me today. And may you continue to inspire others through your work and through your writings.